It was like, come join us, as we were like dancing and singing. And to us, that's activism. Like, we were just unapologetically brown and Pacific. I'm from Malie and Awhenga in Samoa, and Holonga on the island of Vava'u in Tonga. But I feel like my villages are also Three Kings here, and Ponsonby, where I spent a lot of my schooling. Three Kings has shaped a lot of my childhood memories. We've got a whole mix. I feel like that's a little bit reflective of who I am and who my family is. We're a little bit, hood, but we have also spent a lot of time going to school and working in white spaces. Whenever I enter a space, I acknowledge my villages because it's like acknowledging who I come from. The way that my nana taught us was very rooted in the Samoan culture. But then when I went to school, it was kind of like a complete flip. At times, I think coming up in the New Zealand education system, I did feel like I couldn't be who I was at home, my safe space. Like, sometimes I felt like speaking up about Pacific issues was wrong. Advocating for Pacific, like anything Pacific, was wrong. Pacific kids often are navigating two worlds. In terms of being connected to my islands, climate activism and climate, advocacy is the way that I link myself to my heritage. Like on world maps, the Pacific is minimized to like a bunch of dots on like a blue canvas, when in reality there is so much richness. There's like hundreds of languages, there's so much culture. For me, being connected to my islands is knowing that our islands may be small, but the actions of our people and the power and the mana and the willingness to show up for one another is greater. Once you see that the way that you move about the world will impact generations to come, that changes how you think, how you move. The severity of climate change, I think there's levels to it. It's like the ocean, it's wave after wave after wave. First it's the immediate destruction, then it's homes, jobs, food, and then people are forced to leave their homes, forced to leave a place that has always nurtured them. These islands are where our ancestors are buried. These islands are where our traditions, our history, it's in the land. And for Pacific people, our connection to the land is extremely sacred. I was working on the first ever Pacific issue of Salient, and one of my close friends, Sulani, she hit me up and was like, hey, Pacific Climate Warriors, a lot of what we do is centered around storytelling. I know that you've been doing this work. What are your thoughts on climate advocacy? What are your thoughts on climate change? And at first I was like, bro, I know nothing. I remember sitting in that first meeting and they're like, they hate that I said this. They're not old, but to me, they're adults, accomplished, have their shit together, whatever. And they're talking about Pacific Climate Warriors, they're talking about climate advocacy, and I'm thinking, what the hell? What have I gotten myself into? I joined the Pacific Climate Warriors in the lead up to the September marches last year in 2019. quite often in media, the Pacific is painted as like suffering, needy, but being a Pacific climate warrior has enabled us to reclaim what activism is to us. We co-hosted with School Strike for Climate, which was a huge honour. They turned to us and they said, "You lead the march." And we were in our traditional wear and we danced and sang to Parliament. We sang the songs of our ancestors. We stopped every so often to savor and to, acknowledge the crowds that were joining. It was so surreal because it was like, come join us, as we were like dancing and singing. And to us, that's activism. Like, we were just unapologetically brown and Pacific. It was so, I still can't get over it. Like, we led 40,000 people to Parliament.
I joined the fight in honour of my ancestors who did no harm, for my grandparents and the islands that were their foundation and thus mine, for my baby cousins, so that they may see the whenua, where our ancestors are buried, the whenua that is part of them, and the whenua in all its majesty before it is too late.
I think what motivates me is seeing our youth pull up. It's not even like defiance, it's like they're all so empowered and so intelligent and so informed and willing to be a good ancestor, In my speech, I talked about how I don't want to have to say to my grandfather that it was too late. I don't want to have to say, "I'm sorry we couldn't visit your homeland. I'm sorry you couldn't show me where you grew up." Climate advocacy for me is like, it's honouring him and it's honouring my grandma as well as where she comes from in Samoa. My dream is that young Pacific kids growing up in New Zealand are able to call New Zealand home without feeling anxious about their future, anxious about their cultural identity and their ties to the Pacific. I want my younger cousin, so she's turning 5 next year, she's starting primary school. I want her to be able to not worry that Samoa isn't going to disappear. In the future, I hope that New Zealand can proudly say that they supported the Pacific in combating climate change. I hope that it won't be too late, that Pacific people are still able to reconnect with their homelands. I want New Zealanders to hold our leaders accountable, and I want New Zealanders to listen to Māori, to listen to Pacific people, and to let those communities lead.